Right, so, have you been missold a Labour government? Did you believe the promises and pledges of Keir Starmer? Well, you aren't alone. He did it to members of his own party by pretending to be something he wasn't, and now having gotten himself elected as Prime Minister, mostly it has to be said on anti-Tory sentiment, people are very quickly realising all that change he was promising amounts to no change whatsoever, and nothing is so raw and painful in our memories of just how badly our governments have betrayed us before, can betray us, than the Tories did over our energy bills. Well, not only are Labour, despite promises made previously to stop bills rising, sat there watching them rise again and saying there is nothing they can do, but Labour have actually set themselves up really quite badly here, because not only were they voted in to be different, they have a colossal majority where they can enact real, meaningful change, but are not only choosing not to do that, but donations from the oil and gas lobby to several Labour MPs might well have helped to ensure that too. Starmer's Labour are approaching this crisis in a manner even worse than the Tories managed it last time, and for those who struggled last time, it looks set to be even worse this time around as a result. Labour, it would appear, has been bought and paid for by the oil and gas lobby.
I know this will be really worrying news for lots of families who will face even greater struggles this winter, and it's a direct result of our country's exposure to international gas markets that are controlled by dictators, and that is our legacy left to us by the last government. And this government will also do everything it can to protect bill payers, reforming the regulator so it's a strong champion of consumers, making standing charges fairer, and increasing funding for energy efficiency so people can cut bills. But this is obviously really worrying news for lots of families in our country.
I'll start by saying, I think as Ben said earlier in your programme, I talk to customers on a regular basis, and I know this is not welcome news for many households, and I know many households still struggle with all of their bills, including energy.
Can you do a couple of simple explainers for us? Someone listening to you this morning, as you said, they might be wearyingly thinking, I've just listened to the boss of Ofgem saying 10% more. Ouch. Can you explain to us in the clearest possible terms why that 10% figure can't be 6%? Why can it not be 8%? Why can you not just fix that price lower?
Well, the main reason is that the price cap is designed in a way that says, look, energy companies can recover fair costs and a small profit, but no more than that. And when those costs change, those costs unfortunately do feed through to the bill.
Today, the energy price cap rise has been announced, and that's going to cause real pain for so many households. So many people have said to me, look here, I may not be the hardest up, but I'm going to really struggle to pay these energy bills. Small businesses that have said, look, the last 2 years have been really tough with COVID, and now we're expected to pay these massive increases. At the same time, oil and gas companies are making enormous profits. And I think everyone can see that's just not right. And that's why the Labour Party has a fully costed plan to freeze energy bills this winter. And we'll pay for that with a windfall tax on those unexpected profits. I completely understand why so many people are frustrated at the government that's not doing anything about their energy bills, that's dithering and delaying, just like it did at the beginning of the year. In the end, politics is about choices. And this government is choosing to protect the profits of oil and gas companies, unexpected profits of oil and gas companies, rather than sticking up for and helping hard-working families and struggling businesses. I hope that, just as we did earlier this year, we can force them into a U-turn, because under my leadership, Labour is on the side of working people. And under my leadership, we can have a fresh start for Britain.
Right, so that was a little montage of clips there, ending with one of Keir Starmer from 2022. So the midst of the last energy bill crisis under the Tories, telling us that politics is about choices, and how Labour under his leadership would make different choices, and be on the side of working people with their bills. And yet here we are today, not only with Ed Miliband repeating the same lines the Tories said about our energy and why our bills are going up, Not saying so in so many words, but basically blaming Putin, whilst also blaming the decisions of the last government, because, let's face it, that's always popular. They always do it. The Tories did it so much that the minute Labour start saying the same things, they should be shot down in flames before they develop too much of a habit for doing it as well. Because what Keir Starmer said there whilst he was in opposition was true. For a change, for him, politics is about choices. And he's in power, is making not only the same choices the Tories did, his choice, but is actually set to make the situation this time around even worse. And I'll come back to how in a moment. Starmer can hide behind his choices to build more wind farms, of course, more solar, lift the bans on onshore wind farms, and his GB energy, which is a scam in itself because it won't provide any energy at all. It's simply an investment vehicle to pay for all of the infrastructure he's promising, chasing private funds, private money, because Rachel Reeves won't spend to invest on anything, it seems. She'll see this country PFI'd to within an inch of its life. But even when constructed, these new sources of energy, these will feed into a system which is entirely run for profit. And as the Ofgem chap said on that bit of VT there, the cap is in place to cover the costs to the energy companies and allow them to make a small profit. Now you hear those words small profit in relation to energy companies. You probably laugh in derision or swear at the notion, of course, with all the blame being put up on the cost of the international gas that we buy by that same chap, Jonathan Brearley, Ofgem's CEO, much in the same way Miliband was not quite naming Putin, but we know who he was indicating because the Tories were far less shy about naming Putin when they were letting our energy bills go up, weren't they? But before I get on to Putin or the finger of blame being cast his way, Ofgem acting like there's nothing they can do, they have to let the price cap rise for that small profit to be allowed, is a sick joke. But it's also a sick joke built into Ofgem's remit. And although Miliband has mentioned reforming the regulator, if it isn't done in such a way that their remit is significantly expanded, then it will remain just as toothless and still talking about small profits, because actually Brearley is right when he's talking about small profits from Ofgem's perspective. Not that that comes as much comfort to us as bill payers, and of course makes us laugh and or swear all the more when he claims to be protecting customers as his main goal. Now, Brearley was also interviewed this morning on GMB by Adil Ray. For a change, GMB had a decent host on who was actually going to ask sensible questions and wasn't going to indulge in arguments over petty racism or interviewing their own wife. And he put to Brearley that people felt this was another con from Ofgem, that people felt the energy companies had made enough money out of us, and accusations that Ofgem were in the pockets of the energy companies. All good points, all reflective of how so many of us feel. And then Ray put figures to Brearley about this. Scottish Power's profits in 2023 were £576 million. EDF's profits rose from £730 million to more than £2 billion in the first half of 2023. He quoted the wages of some of the top energy bosses. BP's boss Bernard Looney had a pay rise from £4.46 million in 2021 to £10 million in 2022 was one such, for instance. It's no wonder people laugh when Ofgem talks of small profits. But you have to realise where these companies are making all their money and what Ofgem's remit in all of that actually is. Because all of these companies make money in our energy market, which, as I've spoken about before, in a lot more detail. And frankly, I've got a whole playlist of utility rants you can find all this out on my YouTube channel, rather than me going over it all again in detail here. But basically, the energy market is split up into three parts. Generation of energy, which is self-explanatory. The energy comes from somewhere, doesn't it? The power stations, wind farms, solar, oil, gas, whatever. Then there is distribution, which is wholesale supply from those companies that generate energy to those that don't. Not many of them left, given how many smaller energy companies went under when the Tories oversaw this mess themselves. And then there is supply to us, the consumers. All the money these companies make, virtually all of it, is at generation and distribution. Supply warrants just a very small profit margin, and Ofgem's remit is only over the supply arm of the energy market. The so-called energy regulator has no remit whatsoever over generation or distribution. So when the head of Ofgem says only small profits are made, it's because under his remit, he can only look at those small supply-end profits. He has to ignore the massive profits being made elsewhere. And because of that, he can't even then force the energy companies to sell to us at a loss. In the grand scheme of things, their profits will be made elsewhere. They'll still be making money, even if they did sell their energy to us at a loss. They wouldn't want to sell it to us at that point at all, though, would they? No capitalists, and Starmer's Labour are absolutely just a bunch of capitalists, they are not socialists, would legislate for them to do as such, no more than the Tories would. Starmer did say he'd freeze bills, he wouldn't let them rise. Well, we're all now going to be victims of Starmer's lies and broken promises there too, aren't we? His word is worthless, voters were warned. Back to Ofgem a minute though. When you look at the About Us section on their website, you will see, first line, that they claim to be the UK's independent energy regulator. And although that is technically true, in reality it's also a little bit of a nonsense, because Ofgem is actually a non-ministerial government department. In other words, it's part of the government. It's run by the civil service, not overseen by a particular minister, but there is oversight provided by the Cabinet Office. How this technicality is pulled off is that although they are a government department, they have no power to change legislation handed to them. In other words, what the government of the day says to them, they have to implement. Remember that one when the government blames Ofgem for anything pretty much, or when Ofgem says their hands are tied as to who it is actually tying them. But it's not just government that impacts that, because the independence of such bodies is also governed by court rulings. Obviously they can't be above the law, but also by those that fund that department so that it can function. And Ofgem is funded, yes, in part by the Treasury, but also by licence fees paid by the industries they were set up to regulate. Can you see the problem there? So if you take all the profit from the supply arm of the energy industry, who will fund Ofgem then? That's a factor in all of this as well. So Ofgem's hands are tied by government and the energy companies who in part fund them. But this is Putin's fault, isn't it? That's what we're being told too. Gas prices, that Brearley chap blamed for price rises. Well, here's a handy chart of where the UK got its gas from last year, according to solar energy campaigner SunSave. They've hardly got skin in the game to lie about such things, and we all know we need to get away from reliance on fossil fuels, not least of which now because we can't, well, seem to be able to afford them anymore. You'll note Russia isn't on there because we don't get gas from Russia, at least not directly. We have had a tiny bit from the likes of Spain, the Netherlands and Belgium right at the bottom of that chart there, which may have come from Russia originally. Functionally, much of our gas comes from the North Sea, though, from the same energy generators who might also be scalping us at the supply end of the energy market too. We know from the Ukraine war, however, that this has interrupted gas supplies, those people who get it from Russia. But to those nations on the continent, therefore, you'll be delighted to hear France, as just one example, won't be hiking its citizens' energy prices despite being very much more reliant on that Russian gas. Despite them still being at war with Ukraine. How does that work out? Why is that then, Damo? Well, they own their energy infrastructure, don't they? They renationalised. Now we have EDF here in this country, a French company, French state-owned, hiking bills. That in part, well, that will be used to offset French bills by charging us more. We can say the same about Germany as well. Nationalised energy industry, no price rise. They own E.ON, so the same story applies. Starmer wants to renationalise the energy market here, didn't he? When he was running to be Labour leader, he said we were renationalised a lot. But again, that turned out to be another massive lie too, didn't it? In fact, not only has Starmer lied about that, not only has he broken his promise to the country to not let our bills rise again by letting our bills go up by 10% and then claiming, oh, there's nothing we can do, just like the Tories did before. But all the signs are there he is going to bungle the situation at our expense to an even worse extent. And once more, it's Rachel Reeves's arbitrary fiscal rules that will see this happen. Those blasted rules of hers, utterly meaningless as they are tying Labour's hands in a manner they cannot respond to this crisis in a manner that puts people first. And they will be used as the excuse Labour hide behind. The worst off, when the Tories oversaw this energy crisis last time, we were of course given a cost of living crisis payment, or several payments of £600 to help offset the cost of those bills previously. There's no sign of that happening under Labour, nor can it because of the fiscal rules. They won't let Reeves spend out on this, so will she break the rules or just leave people to suffer? Of course, pensioners are set to be hit with an energy double whammy now, since 10 million of them have just been told they're losing their winter fuel payments thanks to Reeves's penny pinching and a refusal to tax the rich. And when you think of rich donors, you automatically think now, are Labour taking any of them from people linked to the energy industry? And the answer to that is, well, of course they have. According to Global Witness, the new Labour intake of MPs have, between them, taken some £45,000 in donations from the gas and oil industry lobbyists, including one MP, Jack Abbott, having taken £2,000 in donations from EDF itself directly. Keir Starmer had the nerve to bemoan enormous profits being made by the oil and gas lobby back in 2022, but when some of that gets donated to his MPs, different story now, isn't it? No talk of a windfall tax here and now, is there? It's time profit margins and the Tories' fault, and let's blame Putin for good measure instead, were put by the wayside. As you might correctly surmise, it is the Green Party that will come out against this lobbying and all this money being handed over to Labour individuals. Carla Denyer, Green Party co-leader, having said, "To hear that MPs from Labour or any other party are taking donations from firms connected to the fossil fuel industry is deeply concerning. We are facing a climate emergency, and there can be no room for malign influences on policy making whilst our planet boils. Unfortunately, the current rules aren't fit for purpose. We need a firewall between MPs and the oil and gas lobby. These MPs should return the donations they've been given, and Labour should bring in legislation that prevents donations, sponsorship and the buying up of former ministers by oil and gas lobbyists. We would also like to see a ban on the practice of MPs doing consultancy work for fossil fuel interests and the introduction of stricter rules on MPs taking jobs in the industry after leaving Parliament. Same old corrupt politics, same old Tories, be they wearing blue rosettes or red ones these days. For as long as only these two parties ever take power, neither will offer the change this country needs. And if anything, this bunch of red Tories could be even worse than the blue ones we just got rid of. This isn't the only issue in recent days. This has brought into question Rachel Reeves's fitness to be Chancellor when she insists there is never any money available to spend on anything. Her economic god complex got shattered over that elsewhere too, as this video recommendation will tell you all about. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.